Welcome to Whiskey Lore, The Interviews. I'm your host, Drew Hanish, the Amazon bestselling author of Whiskey Lore's Travel Guide to Experiencing Irish Whiskey, and also the Travel Guide to Experiencing Kentucky Bourbon. And today, we're about to learn about one of the newest distilleries on the Irish Whiskey Trail, a distillery that has a familiar name, especially in relation to Belfast. I am talking about Titanic Distillers, and I'm honored today to have as my guest the distillery's head distiller, Damien Rafferty. Damien, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Drew. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm a big fan of your podcast.
Well, thank you so much. And it was great actually having you. You reached out to me on LinkedIn, and it's like I had been talking a little bit. It was a little scattered when I was putting together my book on Irish whiskey because I had heard of Titanic Distillers and I tried to email directly, but I didn't get any kind of response initially. And I don't know how I bumped into the team, but sooner or later I did. And it was just after I had put the book up to be printed, and they're like, "Oh, you called it Titanic Distillery and it's Titanic Distillers." I was like, so I jumped back in. I was actually able, because I hadn't launched it yet, to make the change and get it in there. But it's a funny story because it really shows how the Irish whiskey industry is just like exploding right now, and it's hard to keep up with some of the new distilleries that have come along, and Titanic was a perfect example of that. So, and you guys are just now launching your tours, so it's first chance for the public to see you guys too.
That's right, yeah. And I think you might have to keep updating your book, version 1, 2, 3, 4, with all these distilleries. But yes, we're just at the cusp of opening 4 tours. So we offer 4 tours, all accessible on our website. So where the distillery is located is in the historic Thompson Dock and Pump House. So any history buffs would know that this is the last place where the Titanic rested on dry land before it set sail. So as part of the Belfast Harbour Commission's area, and Harland and Wolff would have built the dry dock to accommodate the construction of the ships. So we've been very fortunate here that we've been able to acquire the building, and as you can see behind me, it's quite a lofty building. This is the old pump house, and this is where it housed the pumps that drained the dock, just beside us here. So as a tourist, you'll be able to come see the dock where the Titanic was, but also inside here we have managed to maintain everything that's original from 1907 when this building was completed, and you can just see over my shoulder here that that's an original feature from 1907 that's still in operation today. Wow. So it's a lovely mix of history and old Belfast and new Belfast. So we've got the old shipbuilding heritage on site here, but also new Belfast, as in we're the first distillery in Belfast in almost 90 years.
Okay, so we go all the way back. In fact, I had to look up the exact date because the last distillery in Belfast was Royal Irish Distillers, which was 1935, I believe. And what's interesting about their story is that while the Irish whiskey industry was imploding, they were still successful, but they had deaths, as I understand, that kind of left them going, who's going to run this thing? And so they just said, we'll just shut it down, which is an interesting story, that Belfast was still pumping along on putting whiskey out. And that it really was, just an internal company thing that stopped it. And
yeah.
we think
you'd love to have been a fly in the wall in that boardroom, wouldn't you? Just to see what the mood was like. I was just talking to one of our tour guides there recently, and we were talking about this, and we thought maybe, did they see the writing on the wall? Did they think, oh, there's no future? We might as well just wind up, quit while we're ahead. And it sort of gives you an indication, like that's where Irish whiskey was, a profitable distillery. Yeah, they might have said, well, we've no heir to the throne, but really they might have seen the writing on the wall. So it's kind of like gives you a different perspective on like where we've come from in those 90 years.
Yeah. And when we think of Northern Ireland, we think of Bushmills, because Bushmills was the lone wolf up there for so long. What's amazing is that Belfast, being a good-sized city, that wasn't the first place that people thought of to put a distillery. It's taken a little time, little dot plots all over the map going on with all of these distilleries popping up, and then
Mhm.
Belfast kind of sitting there as a central location. How did the distillery come about?
So the Titanic Distillers, we have to go back a few years. So one of our founders, Peter Lavery, he's known to be the first lottery millionaire in Belfast, back in the 90s. He has been interested in whiskey for quite a number of years, and he owned a brand called Danny Boy, and and in commemoration of the 100 years of the Titanic in 2011, released a Titanic whiskey, and he sourced those products from Cooley. So similar to like the likes of Slainte, they were sourcing from Cooley, and then when Beam Suntory bought it over, they ceased the third party selling of liquid. So Peter then tried to gather a few investors together to build a distillery, and one thing led to another. It didn't quite happen, and then he came across this building. So this building here was also a tourist attraction as well. The tours of the dock, and there was a cafe and different things. And he had the vision to put a distillery in it quite a number of years ago, and he's brought together a couple of other investors, and between the three of them, they have brought this to life. And it's been a been a long couple of years for the directors to get it to this far, and it's within touching distance.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting to see whether you or McConnell's would get open first in terms of the race. They're over in the old Crumlin Road jail, and
Yeah,
trying to get. I can imagine because Sarah over there has talked about the challenges that they had in terms of getting planning and getting permissions to do all of that stuff. And I would imagine you guys probably went through the same issues with this distillery.
absolutely. Yeah. There's not a single screw has been taken out of a wall or anything. Well, obviously had to attach a few things to walls, but just behind me, you can see the sort of the tops of some of the vessels, and you can see
Hmm.
the sort of the flooring. So that's like a suspended floor, and there's two levels, and that's still suspended above the original pump well. So there's nothing actually touching the original floors. We've had to build a floating distillery, as much like a structural um,
Wow.
floating above here.
Yeah.
So everything is suspended above the ground that you can see around behind me here. And we actually had to get the crane here behind me recommissioned to allow us to drop in the steel and bring the tanks in, and the stills. And so as you can see, sort of the big wheels up here behind me, that's all hand operated. So yeah, it's been a long time to get them, the different sort of what heritage will allow you to do, what is more efficient to do run a distillery. So we might be slightly less efficient than most, but at least we've got a story to tell here.
Yeah. So was it basically and the floating platform, was that out of necessity or was that out of kind of creative design and saying, hey, this also preserves the building?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both. So where we are, where I'm sitting right now in the middle I'm sitting in the middle of the building. So we've got the distillery on this side, and then on the other side, similar size building, and that's the visitor centre. And I think originally the planning committees wanted us to be in the other side, where it was, normal floors, and build a mezzanine in there, and make things simple. But then they went down the harder route and built the distillery on two floors here. So yeah, there's a lot of work went into this, and if you come to visit, you'll see even the anchors into the side of the into the wall. One of the builders told me he spent 3 weeks on his hands and knees can going out the stone just to be able to get the the foundations into it. So yeah, it was definitely a lot more difficult to do it this way, but the result is incredible.
Yeah. So when you were younger, was that museum there, or is the museum even something that is fairly new to that area?
The Titanic Museum.
Yeah.
That's I'm not actually sure on the exact opening, but it's fairly fresh, and I have to admit I haven't actually been into it myself. I keep meaning to go, but I haven't actually got. But it's they've done a fantastic job at driving tourism to this area of Belfast, and there's such heritage on this what we call the Maritime Mile. So from the city centre right out to here, the history is just incredible. Like you've got the slipways where they have festivals now in the summer, and you can actually walk along a path along the lagoon and see the ships sailing by, and like at some point there, it feels like you can touch the passenger ferries going past. We're
Mm.
that close. So yeah, but the Titanic Museum, they are obviously promoting the ship and the story of the ship. But here at the distillery, we feel like that story's already been told. So what we're trying to focus on here really is the hands that built the ship. So the
Mm.
different like the craft and the graft that was required by the different trades and the men and women of Belfast to really to build this place. Our tagline is the blood, sweat, and years. So it's like a nod to the toil that went on here in the ships, and that at the end of a hard day's work, you can have a dram to relax.
Yeah.
So that's really where we see ourselves as, we're talking about the people that built the ship, not necessarily the ship itself.
And it's interesting, again, thinking about the history of Belfast, it's in such a ideal place for shipping, yet it doesn't seem like it was until the early 20th century before the focus of making that really a shipbuilding area, because that as we were saying before, 1907 I think was a date you gave. I know the White Star Line, when it came in, I think 1911 was when they started building these massive ships, and Titanic was
Hmm.
just one of the ships that was being built there at the time. And this is my ignorance, I guess, in a way of how ships are built. But I mean, they basically have to build them on dry land. This is the idea of the pump house, is that the pump house is actually bringing the water out. Is there like a area, an encased in area where it's kind of almost like a dam that they've dammed it up, and then they can build it and then open that gate and allow the water to come in to make it rise up?
Yeah, that's exactly it. So the ships, the White Star Lines, as you said, were built up on the Titanic slipways. Well, they're now called the Titanic slipways, which would have been Harland and Wolff's yards. Um, they would have built everything except the rudders and the propellers and different things, and then just slid that into the water. It would have been tugged just up the channel a little bit here, and the dry dock, like you said, it's a huge big dam. There's a caisson gate that is open and it's filled with water, and the ship was pulled in using capstans and just pulled into position, and then the caisson gate would have been closed, and then the pumps would have been activated here to pump the water out and settle the ship on top of keel blocks so that the workers can access the bottom of the ship, attach whatever they need to do, do the internal fit outs, whatever was required, and then whenever it was ready, caisson gate would have been opened, uh, floated the boat, and then sailed out. So that's a very simplistic way of talking about it, but right here in front of me, if I turn the camera around, you would see the hydraulic accumulator, which was the piece of equipment that was used to open up that 1,000-ton gate. It would use hydraulic pressure, and it towers way above my head here. But if you come in, you'll be able to see like the mechanisms of how that all operated, and the tour guides go into great detail and really explain. Even the tour of the dry dock itself is incredible because it really gives you a sense of the scale of this place. The dry dock itself is 850 feet long, and
Mm.
then there was an extension piece added to the gate so it can extend out to 887.5 feet, which is quite good because I think the Titanic was 858 feet, so it just fitted in and no more. And these were the biggest dry docks in the world at the time. So absolutely monumental scale, and the technology used to open and close gates and pull the ships in was almost like the iPhone of their day. They were
Mm.
really advanced technology. So
So, so how long did these docks? Because we think of, and maybe this is a good reason not to associate necessarily with the ship as much as, because we know what happened to the ship, and that was only a year
mhm.
later. But yet you have this dock here, this massive dock. How long did this stay operational as a dock?
I think the last ship in here was 2001. So
Oh, okay.
there's been over 900 ships serviced in this dock. So it really is a testament to how well made it was. And I'm a former civil engineer, so I really appreciate the work that has gone into constructing something like this. It's incredible.
Is the old machinery, the old pump still there
They're
or
still here, yes. They're just
okay?
behind me in this pump well, yeah. And
Wow.
I've been assured that with a little bit of lubricating oil and a couple of hits with a hammer, they could start again and run. You know, they don't build them like they used to.
That's true. That's true.
Hmm.
Well, it was supposed to be
Yeah.
the indestructible ship, the Titanic. Of course, you're never supposed to say something like that.
Oh, that's a jinx, isn't it?
It is. It
Yeah.
is. So, so how much do you know about Belfast distilling history? And kind of you're from outside the area, but you're from Northern Ireland,
That's right, yeah.
as I understand. So, I mean, when you were growing up, because now you say you started as a civil engineer, and now all of a
Hmm.
sudden you're in the distilling industry. And I'm sure when you were growing up, you weren't thinking, man, I'm going to be a head distiller someday, because that probably wasn't really a career opportunity unless you were going to be at Bushmills, and Bushmills being one employer, that's a pretty hard job to get into if you're going to do it.
Hmm.
Um, so what was the distilling attitude back then? Was Ireland a country for beer, and really there was no focus so much on whiskey when you were growing up?
Yeah, well, I suppose you're right in what you said. There was only really Bushmills available, and the likes of Jameson in Cork. And where I grew up is on the border between the north and the south. And like Bushmills and Jameson felt equidistant, as far away from where I grew up as possible. But near Newry, where I grew up, is Dundalk, where Great Northern Distillery is situated now. Used to be the Harp Brewery.
Hmm.
And growing up on the border, you sort of ebb and flow across the border depending on the exchange rate where you do your grocery shopping. So I remember as a family we used to do our weekly grocery shopping in Dundalk, and we'd drive past the old brewery. And um, to be honest, it never crossed my mind that that was a career path.
Mm.
And you know, it wasn't until later in life that I realized there's a lot of transferable skills between what I had learned and worked in, and what in the brewing and distilling industry was. But yeah, I suppose just speaking from my own experience, I suppose my family weren't really big drinkers, so I suppose I didn't really have that influence on me about that it was a possible career. And when I was in school, it was around, say, the early 2000s. There was a huge boom in construction in Ireland, and a lot of us were all encouraged to go down that path of construction. And it was almost like we were blinkered, our careers advice was very narrow: just go into either a trade or some sort of profession in the building industry, which was an awful pity, because in 2010 when we graduated was the biggest crash in
Oh
construction.
man.
Yeah, so it just was bad timing, I suppose.
Yeah. So
But
what drew you into getting into the whiskey industry?
so that's good lead on. So after the crash, I remember scratching around trying to get some work. I'd recently just graduated from university and trying to get a job in engineering, and I'd done a year's placement with a company, a civil engineering company, which, funnily enough, actually we built the road to Tullamore Distillery. So we built the
Oh,
road going to that
you
road
did
that
all
comes
those
out of
you
the town,
you
all
did
those
all those
roundabouts.
roundabouts. Oh my goodness. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
roundabout. I'm getting some practice here.
Yeah. So that's yeah, that was my claim to fame, is that we built that road. But then fast forward 2010, there was literally zero construction work happening, and there was huge emigration, I suppose, with people of my age to Australia, and I was one
Mm.
of those people. And yeah, as I landed in Australia, it was literally they were having a boom in the mining and resources industry. So I worked in the mining industry for 2 years, building railways, taking iron ore from the mine to the port. So I spent 2 years of my life pretty much in a similar environment to this, only a lot hotter, in the big industrial practices. And then I built another motorway in the city for another 2 years. So I spent a total of 4 years in Australia. But while I was there, I used to work 2 weeks on, 1 week off. So I'd work 2 weeks on the job and then have a week to explore. And I spent a lot of that time, traveling around the different craft beer, brew pubs and different things like that, and craft distilleries that are in West Australia. And that really opened my eyes to flavour
Mm.
because in Ireland at the time, we're pretty much squeezed by like the big companies like Diageo and like their choice was either Budweiser or Guinness, really pretty much on the on the taps. And
Yeah.
then all of a sudden in Australia, I had this exposure to so much flavour, and it just enamored me straight away. And I got quite friendly with some of the local brewers, and they showed me around the breweries and different things, and it almost sparked something in my head, like this is something that I would like to do, but never thought I could. And then I decided to leave Australia and do a little bit of traveling. So I found myself in Canada,
Mm.
in the Rockies, as a snow shoveler, working in a ski hill, and it was the best job I ever had. You just turn up at 6 a.m. and shovel snow for a couple of hours and then go skiing for the rest of the day. But the town, the little village was known as Fernie in British Columbia, and they had little brewery there as well. And again, I'd find myself in their tap room asking questions. What's this? How does that work? Uh, but what really drew me to everything was the ingredients and the malt. Um, I was seeing like what looked like barley, and by the way, I grew up on a farm where we grew barley to feed cows,
Mm.
and I was like, they're turning barley into beer. I was like, surely maybe we could do this back in
Ding.
Ireland. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I found myself back in Ireland after that traveling. I also did quite a bit of backpacking through the states, like through like Bend, Oregon, and
Mm.
that place was just incredible. The beer was just phenomenal.
I was gonna say
And
that was the beer capital of the U.S. It has been on and off. It fights with
yeah,
Asheville, which is where I grew up in North Carolina, year after year.
yeah. So I would find myself like say after a 3 or 4 day hike, in a local brewery that's maybe only producing a couple of gallons at a time, and I'd be like, this is the best beer I've ever had, and they're like, well, we're not even the best brewery in town. But what's your secret? And they said, oh, we use all the local ingredients. We can grow hops here. We've got, a malt house just an hour's drive up the road. And then I drove by a malt house and I thought, wow, this is incredible. And the barley that they were using, in my opinion, was inferior to the barley that we would have grown in Ireland.
Mm.
And I was like, this is incredible how they can get so much flavor out of what I used to think was animal feed. So, to cut a long story short, I found myself back in Ireland and working as an engineer again, but I couldn't settle. I just kept thinking about malt and beer and how it was all connected to farming. And so I led that ended up I started up Ireland's only floor maltings on my family farm.
Okay. Wow.
So yeah, so I don't think a lot of people know that about me, but I had a floor maltings. It was Ireland's only malt house, Northern Ireland's only malt house, and then the only floor maltings in the whole island.
I was gonna
And
say because right now a lot of people get their stuff from Minch Malt, so but that's
that's
in
right.
the Republic. So is that
Hmm.
was that around when you were doing this?
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, like
Okay.
mints have been around for a long, long time.
Yeah.
But I obviously did a bit of research. I went to speak to distillers and brewers, and I asked them, where does your malt come from? And like the brewers would say, oh, we get it from Belgium, we get it from Germany. And I said, well, why don't you get it from Ireland? They're like, well, there isn't a variety. There's like the likes of Minch produce huge quantities, but it's all like for the likes of Guinness and Heineken and Irish distillers, so it's all huge volumes, but not enough focus on the quality and the flavour. So again, the light bulb went off. I thought, well, maybe I can do something here because I'd seen it in small scale in the States. So I took myself off back over to the States and I spent some time with Hudson Valley Malt, Dennis Neisel from Hudson Valley Malt, and
Mm.
spent some time with him and he taught me everything he knew about how to make floor malt in New York State. And I went to visit like Valley Malt in Massachusetts and different places. And then I came back and started up the malt house on the family farm.
Wow.
But it was small scale. It was only 1 ton batches. So like to sort of give you the scale, my biggest customer is Cologne or was Cologne. So like
Okay.
that gives you a sense of the scale.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't huge. It was so small. And
Yeah. Good neighbor to have, though.
yeah, so myself, I met with Brendan before he even had the distillery, and like he was so passionate about using local ingredients and local produce. So yeah, that gave me sort of the impetus to keep going with it. But then it was hard work, and I was also wasn't I suppose a lot of people were not really suspicious of it, but couldn't afford to pay the premium prices that
Yeah.
I was hoping to charge. So I found it was a struggle really. So I had to seek work like during daytime job. So I got a job as a junior brewer in what would have been the Pierce Lyons Brewery, and
Okay. Did
yeah,
you were
from
you were you getting over monkey shoulder? Did you get that? Did you understand what that syndrome is all about?
oh yeah, I knew it, and every other condition, lower back syndrome, yeah, because yeah, it's hard work floor malting. I can see now why it's literally a team job, not a one man operation.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
um,
You think of those big
so
malting floors that they used to have, and some places still have. I got to turn some barley when I was at Bowmore Distillery in Isla, but I only did
mhm,
it for like 2 minutes. So
that was enough.
I, yeah, that was enough. That was enough.
Yeah, so I had to seek gainful employment, so I got the job as a junior brewer at well, before Pierce Lyons was Pierce Lyons Brewery, it was Stationworks Brewery,
Okay.
and it was bought by Alltech. So I started as a junior brewer, and in the evenings and the weekends I would have continued to make the malt, and so I was at Pierce Lyons for 3.5 years, and I progressed from junior right the way up to the head brewer while in my time there. And we went from a 50 hectoliter manual setup to a 100 hectoliter fully automated setup. It was like the investment from Alltech was incredible. It was the Rolls Royce of brew kits, the Steinecker
Wow.
brew kit.
Yeah.
So I learned a lot. I learned on the manual system and then progressed into the automated system, and it was a great learning curve. All the while I was still making malt in my spare time, which I didn't really have much of.
Well, how big was the operation? Versus, have you been to the Kentucky Alltech Brewery?
No, I didn't. We talked about like a brewer sort of exchange program at one point,
Yeah.
but COVID landed, and
Uh,
that sort of put a lot of plans in the bin, really.
yeah. Yeah.
But I would have loved to have gone to Kentucky to Town Branch, and I guess dueling barrels, and
Yeah. Yeah.
all the setups that they have, and there's one in Pikeville as well, I think.
It's maybe.
Yeah,
I know that there was another facility, and I think somebody else started it, and then they bought it. Maybe I'm not sure how that went, but Eastern Kentucky is still a little bit of a mystery to me.
yeah,
I
yeah. Yeah, so
haven't wandered out.
one of the guys actually came over to Dundalk to help us out for a while. I must catch up with him again. Actually, it'd be great to see him again. Maybe even fly over and get him to show me around for a change.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Well,
I'd love to get back over to, or I'd love to get over to Kentucky.
it's nice to see that that they had the brewing facilities as well here in or there in Ireland
Mm,
because it's just interesting when it be, when you go to the Kentucky facility and you basically get a brewery tour, then you get a distillery tour back to back, and to see
mm,
how the two work together. And this is part of what I find interesting. There are two distilleries here in the United States that I can think of that have Samuel Adams
mm,
brewers that went to work for them. One is Chattanooga, and the other one is New Riff in Cincinnati. And getting to taste their beer as it is fermenting and getting ready,
mm,
and we hear about sour mash whiskey here, and you taste sour mash, and they have to apologize if you taste it to say it's going to be a little sour now, but it'll we'll distill it. And then when I tasted what they had at Chattanooga, it's like, man, I could drink this just the way it is. And it opened my mind to the fact that having somebody with a brewing background coming in to work as a distiller is a real advantage.
Yeah, I think Garrod Cahill from Slainte, I think he said brewers make great distillers, but not the other way around.
I
I might be
can see that,
paraphrasing him a
yes.
bit there,
Yeah.
but yeah, working at Pierce Lyons was a great learning curve, and really it taught me the value of like every aspect in brewing, and then plus also they had the distillery down in Dublin, and during COVID there was a bit of because they were effectively a huge visitor centre, they didn't have any visitors, so some of their staff would come up and help us out in the brewery, and that really opened my eyes to distilling as well. So I got to work alongside those guys, and I was really impressed, and it really changed my focus and I am on my career trajectory. So I think with speaking to them guys, I realised that um, in Ireland we've got the technical file and the geographical indicator that we own Irish whiskey. Nobody else in the world can produce Irish whiskey, and there's just the three ingredients. It can all be produced here on the island, and that really, being an environmentalist at heart, that um, really made me want to make a move into distilling. Whereas in brewing, you have to import your hops, and different things like that. So I think that's what really gave me the impetus to seek the career in distilling as well.
So it's interesting that in Kentucky now they have Moonshine University and they can churn out distillers and get people going on a path right off
hmm
the bat. And so, what was Ireland like at that time? If you have interest in distilling, was there any way to get an education, or did you basically have to find a job that would allow you to step in and apprentice under somebody else?
Um, well, I suppose like in Ireland we can access like the Institute of Brewing Distilling, which is a UK based, or it's worldwide really, and you can go down that route of education, and then Harriet Watt as well over in Edinburgh. There's also a couple of other like IT Carlo, I think, are doing bits and pieces of brewing things, but um, I suppose personally, I thought I'd had enough of sitting in the classroom. I wanted to get practical hands-on experience, and starting at the bottom was really the best way, in my opinion, for myself. You know, I picked it up pretty quickly. I remember 2 weeks after I started in the brewery, one of their brewers left, and they were
Mm.
short-handed, and they're like, "Okay, we need you in the brew house now. Like, you need to learn how to double brew today." So it was like trial by fire, and that's how I learn. So I am supplementing my hands-on experience with the technical qualifications as well, like through the Institute of Brewing Distilling. So I have a qualification already in malting, and I'm working on my diploma in distilling and eventually master distiller.
Nice. So in Ireland, master distiller, or even through the UK, master distiller is not something that you can call yourself unless you have gotten the. That's really interesting because in the US, if you open up a distillery and you've run something through the still, you can call yourself a master distiller if you want to.
Mhm. Yeah, I suppose I was saying this to the tour guides one day. They said to me, "Are you the master distiller?" And I was like, "No, don't confuse the only distiller as the master distiller."
Yeah,
Um, so yeah, I suppose you probably could call yourself that, but I wouldn't feel comfortable knowing that I haven't, passed those exams when you've got the likes of Gro Cahill or Colin Egan up in Bushmills who have gone through, you know, the schooling and those exams are bloody hard. So I wouldn't want to take away any sort of thunder from anybody. I'm not going to call myself anything until I've earned it.
yeah. That's kind of where I'm at. People will call me a historian, and I say I'm not a historian. I love history, and I am a seeker of truth, and I'm a
Mm,
storyteller. But I don't call myself a historian because I don't have a degree from anywhere, and I feel like that's a title that's reserved for people who have put some cash behind their
yeah.
education and that time behind the books and
hmm
getting the instructions. So I get that, and it's like it's always been kind of a curious thing. Brian Watts at Great Northern, I said, "What's your title?" And he said, "Production director." And I think in his feeling was that he didn't see himself as really a master distiller. He saw himself as the guy that was running the place, and that was keeping the wheels churning. So it's interesting to see how people take those titles. We have this thing in the U.S., I think, where everybody wants to come up with a creative title, and so it's kind of a rite of passage when you start up to
Hmm.
come up with a name that is impressive, so people take you seriously. So
Yeah,
I think that's part of it.
yeah, I can understand it, but again, to Brian Watts, like rest in peace. He he's an example of like someone who, there's nobody probably could beat him on technical knowledge in distilling, but yet has
Yeah,
that humble outlook that, I'm not a master until I've earned it.
yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. So so where did you go from Pierce Lyons?
So yes, after Pierce Lyons, so I live just outside Belfast here, and there was a new distillery opened up nearby called Hinch Distillery. So yeah, I applied for a position there because not only was it a 12-minute drive from my house, I also wanted to get involved in the distilling industry, and I suppose I was probably employed there on the strength of my brewing history, and yeah, it's a great facility up there, great team. I learned a lot from them, and I hope they learned some from me too. So it felt like there's a good trifecta of people there. So there was people who were strong in distilling, people who were strong in gin, and then myself strong on ingredients and brewing. So between the three of us, we were able to really, I suppose, shape the production output there.
Yeah. I
And
think I was going to say, I think what's great is for the visitor who wants to come to the area, I mean, you can park yourself in Belfast, and now soon you'll have two distilleries in Belfast to be able to go visit. Hinch, I drove to it. It's a really close to get there as well. You get three other distilleries all
mhm.
within a short drive there as well. So it it's really nice to see this all of a sudden. It's more of a tourist kind of a situation than
Yeah, I think like so County Down, the county that we're all in, I think County Down's becoming nearly the distilling capital of Ireland.
mm,
We've got a few distilleries popping up, and like I said, Copeland and Killowen, Hinch, Shortcross, Acklandville, we're all in the same county. So it's yeah, I think we're becoming a bit of a destination within a destination.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So
Mhm.
you so how did you find out about the Titanic job?
So I met a guy who I knew from Newry, and he asked me if I'd be interested in coming down to Titanic and have a look around. And when I seen the place, I was just completely blown away, by the not only the scale of the dry dock, but the position where it is, the vision that they had, and also the flexibility. And to be honest, I actually thought they wanted me to be just a distiller. I didn't realize I was been asked if I wanted to be the head distiller. So
Nah.
I felt like a bit of imposter almost, but no, it's the opportunity that really attracted me here. Um, the opportunity to have a bit of fun, not fun, but also been serious about the production of the spirit. So I suppose I see um, whiskey, if you can imagine, like it's an exam, and you've got 100 marks. Um, say 60 marks are already set aside for the cask, and then your 40 marks are for your spirit production. Well, I want to ensure that I'm getting 100% in my 40 marks on this side
Yeah.
of production. So I've got this sort of almost free rein to explore with different types of malt, different techniques in brewing, different types of yeast, different times, different temperatures, just to really just tweak here, there, and everywhere to see where we can really produce a complex wash. That, like you say, if you want to drink it on its own, you can, and just to add flavor wherever we can. Not just buy the cheapest malt or the cheapest yeast or the yeast that'll ferment the quickest. Just really put the blood, sweat, and years into really, finding a really good complex spirit here. And yeah, that's the challenge that I'm really excited about. And really look forward to in a couple of years' time, whenever our whiskey has matured, that it's something to be proud of.
Yeah. So you right now are sourcing a spirit. So if somebody, because when I was going through the area, and then they were saying, "Oh, well, there's a Titanic Distillers too," and I went, "Oh, I didn't know." And then they showed me a bottle, and I went, "Oh, they've already got a bottle of spirits." Um, I guess first question is, how do you choose the spirit that you're going to put in that initial sourced offering, and then kind of go back in terms of, were you there when they were commissioning the stills, and prior to that, any part of the decision making in what you were going to be producing when you were distilling your own stuff?
So yes, I've actually got a bottle of our stuff here. So this is our sourced blend. It's sourced from, like most places in Ireland, from Great Northern Distillery. And it's a natural color, so you can see it's a lovely color. Um, I wasn't involved in the sourcing of this because the whiskey's been out there longer than the distillery has been
Okay.
in operation. So no, I wasn't involved in that, but it's a lovely nod to Belfast. The directors call it a Belfast style whiskey, in that there's a slight peated element in it. So
Mm.
there's a small proportion of peated malt in this, but it's not like your Bowmores or your Lagavulins. It's not going to completely implode your senses and just peat reek. It's very, very slight. It's a very, very small hint, and there's also a sherry cask influence in there as well. So it's got that sort of balance of sweet and smoke. And it's a when I said it's a Belfast style, what they were trying to achieve was, so it's a nod to the old industrial heritage of Belfast. So Belfast would have been, a cloud of smoke. There would have been, the
Working
all the
class town, definitely.
working class, all the industry happening. There would have been smoke everywhere, the smell of peat in the air. So I suppose that's where um, the peat sort of element has come from. And then there's a sherry there as well to try and bring up the sweetness element on it, to try and balance the two. It's a 72% grain whiskey and then 28% malt.
Okay.
So yeah, it's a nice, it's a lovely blend, and we'll continue to source this blend until our own expressions are available here in the distillery. So we're hoping that what comes out of this distillery is exclusive, and if you want to get it, you're going to have to come here and get it. So
Are
so
you going to are you keeping the peat element in there?
we haven't settled on you know an exact style that we're going to source or continue with. So I suppose my role really is to produce interesting spirit, source great casks, and then in 3 years' time, hopefully a blender will be able to come out with a really good expression.
Hmm.
Um, but there, we have the option here to go down the peated route if we wish. We could do a campaign of peated if we wish. But we've got so many options. We can even produce not only single malt but also pot still varieties here. So
Okay.
yeah, we've got a lot of flexibility in the brew house, but also in the still house as well.
Do you have a mash and lauter tun separate, or?
So you can just see here we've got it's a mash lighter. So we mash into it, and we
Uh,
can there's a steam jacket around it, so we can manipulate the temperatures and different things to produce what's required for pot still, and then that's a lighter ton as well. So it's an all-in-one vessel.
okay. And then you're triple distilling?
Yes, we've three stills, three lovely pot stills there behind me, if you can just see,
Yeah.
made by Forsyths. So we have the option to double distill as well if we wish. That's
They look
where
they look very small back there. Are they how big are they? Because of course they're at a distance, so I can't really tell.
so our size. So we operate here as one brew, one. So this is a fermenter here. So one brew, one wash back, one distillation.
Hmm.
So each wash bag is 2,500 liters. So the wash still is 2,500 liters, and then 1,500 liters in the middle still, and then in the spirit still is 1,000 liters.
Okay.
So it is small and boutiquey, but we're it suits us. We want to be a bit more known for our quality, not our quantity.
Yeah. Well, when you think of a place like Glenfiddich and you walk in there and you see they have tons of stills, but they're all small stills, which is kind of an interesting
Yeah.
thing to see. Did you travel around to other distilleries much, or have you basically just kind of hung out in the ones that you've worked at?
No, so whenever we head on holidays, my wife and I, it's almost like a busman's holiday. Like we'll go somewhere and I say, "Oh, there happens to be a distillery, just around the corner. We'll maybe go and visit." But so yeah, I try to get to as many distilleries as I can. The last one I got to was Waterford last
Okay.
summer.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of what Waterford are trying to achieve there with their farm, sort of like their single origin and different types of malt and different types of terroir. So big fan of what they're doing down there. And also we're heading to England in the summer just for a bit of a camping trip. So I'm hoping to catch a few English distilleries because I think what they're doing is quite interesting. They're not really tied to the same laws as, say, Scotland or what we're doing in Ireland. They've got a bit more freedom. So I'd like to check out some over there too.
Yeah, I must say, English whiskey is the only one of, well, I haven't had Welsh whiskey and I haven't had English whiskey, so I still have some experimenting myself to do.
Yeah. Also, we have a friend who's fortunate enough to have a house on Isla, so I'd like to take him up on his offer and go over there and visit because it's a short hop. We just
Oh,
get
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. So you haven't been to Islay yet?
No, I haven't been. No, it's
Yeah.
it's on the list. We've got a young family, so it's hard to get out these days.
Yeah. It's funny to think, though, that you could go up to the Giant's Causeway and just look out and see Isla from there.
Yeah,
I've looked the
it's
other way, and it's really interesting to say, oh, Bushmills is right over there.
yeah. Funny. I got talking to a guy. This is a couple of years ago at a conference, and he was like the maltings manager at Port Ellen,
Hmm.
and he was telling me that whenever he first took on the role as maltings manager, one of the first people to come into his office was a local resident, and he said the housing estate was called Antrim View because they look across at County Antrim.
Ah,
And he said, "What can I help you with?" And he says, "Oh, my TV reception for the Irish channels has been interrupted. Can you sort it out?" I said, "Well, what am I going to do about it?" And he's like, "Well, the aerial is on top of the silos, looking toward
oh,
across over to Ireland. So they'd obviously knocked the aerial or something. So he
yeah.
had to go up and fix the aerial for the residents of Isla so they could get their Irish TV channels."
That's so funny.
Yeah,
I like to say, and you've probably heard me say this before because I really enjoy my time in Northern Ireland and Belfast, and just I think part of it was that I felt the comforts of home coming from the mountains of North Carolina and the Scots Irish, and that influence there.
mhm,
But also because I had traveled some through Scotland, and one of my favorite parts of Scotland is Campbelltown,
yeah,
and they're right across from you, and
yeah,
it's like you just feel kind of that you feel that you're more than neighbors in some ways, and maybe watching each other's TV stations is part
yeah,
of the reason.
yeah. Yeah, I remember when I was an engineer, I did a bit of work over in Scotland on the coast, and I could hear like the local radio station clearer here than I did at my home house. It was incredible.
That's so funny.
Mhm.
So describe the tours again for somebody who's gonna come along. You have four different tours that you do.
Yeah, so we've got the signature tour, the premium tour, the dock tour, and the legacy tour. So the dock tour is what it says on the tin. You come along and we've got a tour guide to take you around the Thompson Dock. And then there's the signature tour, which is the distillery. So where I am situated right now in the pump house. So you get to go through a guided tour of the pump house, and then there's a walkway right the whole way around the distillery here, and then back into the visitor centre for a tasting. The premium tour is the dock and the pump house, and then the legacy tour is the dock, the pump house, and then we bring you down into the distillery. You get to have a look around at where I get to play around with every day, and then down. So just below here is now a 44-foot drop down into the
Mm.
pump well, where you get to see the original Gwyn's pumps. So it, and then there's a bottle of whiskey as well to take with you. So the Legacy Tour is only an exclusive tour that there's only so many per month.
Okay. Very nice.
Yeah,
And you guys are open as of well, I'm trying to
the
figure out what date we're talking about.
the 28th.
Of April. So
That's right. Yeah,
so by the time this airs, everybody will be able to
yeah,
make their plans to go to Belfast, and
that's it. Yeah, book a tour on TitanicDistillers.com.
very nice. Yeah, I laugh because I probably would have known about the distillery. Everybody said, "Oh, you're going to Belfast, so you're going to go do the Titanic tour." And I stayed on Newtonards Road, so I was right around the corner from where it was at. But it was
Yeah,
I was just so short on time trying to plug all of these different places in that it's like doing regular touristy things. I hadn't really the time to do it. But if I had, I would have learned a little earlier that there was a distillery there and in the works. And so
yeah. I
next,
suppose this our directors have been very sort of quiet and not really didn't really want to say, oh, we're building something here until actually we had something to show. So
yeah.
now that we do, we're shouting from the rooftops, come and see us now. It's everything's in place, ready to go. So yeah, I think you can be forgiven to not know that we were here.
Very nice. Well, I so in terms of where the whiskey is being sold right now, is it mainly in Northern Ireland and Ireland, or are you into the continent at all? And any plans for the U.S.?
So at the moment we're just really in Northern Ireland, and we're trying to get into the Republic of Ireland. Um, so we not only just whiskey, we have a vodka as well. So it's been made by another distillery for us exclusively. So that's a big seller as well for us. And there is plans obviously to get into the UK and mainland UK and America. So we just need to find the right distributor for us. And there is discussions happening for plans to export to the US. And it may not be the same blend as this. We might have another expression. So that's something we're working on at the moment.
Very nice.
Yeah.
All right. Well, excellent. Well, Damien, I really appreciate you reaching out to me and letting me know that you guys were opening for business and giving us the background and your background. And now people hopefully have a little bit more of a understanding of Titanic Distillers and what they're going to experience there, and to make sure to book, if they're interested in the ship, a trip to the museum. But everybody that's listening to this show should be interested in whiskey, so you will
Yeah.
also want to book a separate ticket for coming
Absolutely.
over to see the
Absolutely.
pump house and the docks. So
Hmm.
thank you so much for being on the show, and I'm wish you the best of success.
No, thank you, Drew. It's my pleasure. And please do call and see us next time you're here.
Will do, definitely.